you don't have, it's not a time for a committee meeting. All you want to do is get the order or the instruction from a fire warden and do what that person tells you to do. See, that's okay. So that type of red style, in his way, at the better end, is fine because you're focusing on the task. The trouble is that's not sustainable. We don't live in a crisis all the time. So we need to be able to look at people and engage people so they actually want to do this work. They actually want to do things, not because they have to. In a task-focused orientation of a really good leader is that they have to do it or else, which they will, as I said, in a crisis, short term, but it's not sustainable long term. The key is, yes, I need to set the picture. Yes, people need to understand what we need to be doing. But now how do I get them to want to do it, not have to do it? In other words, how do I engage them? So it becomes a leadership skill that's sustainable. And that comes from a series of behaviours, which I'm going to go through over part 1 and part 2. And part 2, hopefully the slides are working substantially better than what they are now. That's for certain. So when I talk about behaviour, and that's what I did with this executive. We got away from the task of where he thought that was okay and was sanctioned to talk about what behaviours do you need here in this team? What are you looking for? What's your desire? And one of his desires was the fact he had some time work-life balance because he was working very long hours. The trouble was that was the problem. He put himself in a category that he thought, well, I got to work long hours. He was micromanaging to a point because he was task-focused. He had to keep explaining tasks to people because that's what they were waiting for. And then he used the stick if they didn't do it. That was the challenge. Now, how do you revert to getting something to want to do it? And therefore you can lean back because they're doing it and the wheel is turning itself. And as a leader, all you're doing is oiling the squeaky wheel. You're not pulling the wheel or pushing the wheel. You're oiling the squeaky one. It goes by itself. You just come in and fix any little minor problem that's causing a squeak. That's what you're really after. So did that come? So are you seeing the slides there, Elizabeth, now?
No, we're not seeing this slide.
Oh, well, in fact, I just can't. I'm sorry about all that. But anyway, so the key is what I want to talk about now is understanding behaviours because he was thinking I'm task-focused. That's a strength. And it is. Being task-focused is a strength because if you're people-focused, totally people on the people side, then there's a fair chance you won't get anything done. You're too nice. You don't ask anyone to do anything because you're too nice. So that's at the bottom end of that like a quadrant. So which I would show you the lovely quadrant, which I'll do next on part 2. But at the end of the day, you want to be at the top end, the better end of that task. So yes, I need to be the better end of people focused, but I also need task focused. So it's not one or the other. Life in leadership is all about as much balance as you can get. That's the key. Good leaders are balanced leaders. Putting them in a specific style, as they understand that, where they're taking bits of other styles, and some people say situational leadership. Today I'm task-focused, tomorrow I'm people-focused, blah, blah, blah. And that could be okay. But I suspect you'd be going through those styles every 5 minutes of the day. That's the challenge. So when focusing on specific behaviours, that's the key. So when I talk about behaviour, that's basically what anyone says or does. That's a behaviour. Even silence is a behaviour. So we just got to focus on what we say and do, and how we say and do it is the key. So what I want to talk about here is the human potential paradox that was developed by Dr. Dan Harrison from the Harrison Assessments. So we can ask simple things like, you've got to enjoy what you're doing, but we'll come to that a bit later. What I want to mention there exactly, you enjoy what you're doing, and people hang on their strengths. But what I want to say is that strengths, if you concentrate on your strengths, and which often people say, concentrate on your strengths, don't worry about your weaknesses. The trouble is, in leadership traits, certain leadership traits, that's not the case. Yes, you focus on your strength, but what you've got to look at under the potential, the paradox potential, human potential paradox, is the fact you've got to look at your weaknesses, which is the corresponding trait or the yin and the yang of that particular behaviour. Now, how I'll explain it. A paradox is a result of integrating two seemingly contradictory behaviours that both contribute to an individual's success. That's in leadership and in life. So individuals with balanced paradoxes are more likely to succeed. Now, I'll give you an example of a few as we go through. Let's look at communication. Now, communications, well, we all do it, don't we? For leaders, it's important. For self-leadership, it's important. Everything we do every day, we communicate. And the impact of that communication is the critical aspect in the quality of life. If you're struggling in communication, you do have problems. So that's why I want to look at it first. It's a very important leadership trait or behaviour. So what you're trying to do in your communicating as a leader, and this is no different as a leader of self, communicating with anyone, family, life partners, children, doesn't matter. It's to build a cooperative relationship with others, be respectful of others' self-esteem, yet authentic in your own communication. Now, what I mean by that, when you get to communication, you can either be frank, where the tendency for you to be straightforward, direct, and to the point, and forthright. And in theory, that's more an aggressive behaviour. But the key is you want to keep. There's a point to be made, and you're going to make it. And look, a lot of times that's why it's important to be able to communicate and be frank with people, because they need to hear a message sometimes. Now, the difference is you need the other side of that behaviour. The yin and the yang of that behaviour is diplomacy. I'm either straightforward, direct to the point, or I'm very diplomatic, where the tendency is to state things in a very tactful manner, which is perhaps a passive behaviour. So both are correct at the end of the spectrums. But when you look at that scale, if you're all frank and no diplomacy, you'd be blunt. So the question is, does bluntness get you anywhere? We'll come back to that. Now, if you're the other end of the scale and you're very tactful, that you're so tactful you don't say anything to anyone because you don't upset them, that doesn't have any value at all either. The key is you need to be balanced. Now, it doesn't have to be 50-50, 60-40 is fine, but you need to be balanced. So when you need to say something that needs to be said and they need to hear it, just say it in a diplomatic way. It's not rocket science. And yet I come across so many leaders who say, well, I've just got to say it. So they blurt it out. Trouble is, they wonder why people don't listen, because it hurts them too much, right? It knocks them around. If they listen, all they want to do is mentally mind argue back to them. It's like, if I'm going to experience pain, which some of the blunt words can be, blunt sentences can be painful to people, what do we do when we're about to experience pain? We fight or we flight. Well, you can't run away from your boss, so you just run away mentally. You don't listen. You pretend you are, but you're not really listening. Or if you are, it's diminishing your self-esteem. So it doesn't have any value. And I keep explaining to executives, I said, why would you say it that way? Like, what brought you on to say that way? Well, they've got to be told. Yeah, so what was the impact you were trying to achieve? I want them to be doing what I wanted to do in the future. I said, do you really think they'll be doing it in the future? Do you think they'll, and there's the other problem, do you think they'll come and talk to you in the future? See, it's coming from their head. It's like, I just got to get this out here. So I then got to take those leaders back to their heart, and because heart to heart's the diplomacy, that's the empathy. You've got to have a balance because you want those people to grow. Otherwise, you're always telling them what to do because you're not allowing them to grow and where they want to do it. That's the difference. They're doing because they have to. You want them to do it because they want to. That's what you're after. So just stop, take a breath, and say it in a way that they get some value out of it. Then what you're saying has more impact. And you're not wasting your time. So that's what I'm getting at here. It's about a balance of a behaviour. Now, what you need to do is ask yourself and self-assess. The key is self-awareness, self-assess yourself. Like, do I tend to say what I think that needs to be said? Now, I've got some friends that do that, and they wonder why they don't have a big lot of friends. And I'm helping them through it because they upset too many people too many times. At the same time, so ask the question to yourself, do I tend to say what I think needs to be said without any tactful diplomacy? Or do you tend to be tactful without sufficiently direct and say what needs to be said? See, that's the either end. And so I get some people who just avoid conversations because they know they're difficult, so I'll avoid them because I know I'll only upset people, so I don't say anything. See, no value at all either. What you're trying to do is say what needs to be said while being conscious of being respectful and constructive. So that's the need to give honest message, but in a way that supports the person, not deflate them. That just takes practice. Some people are more gifted at it. That's because they've practiced through their life to get there. Their parents taught them to do that. They've had plenty of practice. But it doesn't mean to say you can't do it at 60 years of age. It doesn't really matter. As long as you practice to say a blunt message in a supporting, non-deflating way. Conversely, it takes just a bit of practice to say what needs to be said. And that's the work I do with executives and people in general. It's just a bit of practice, is all I say. Now we look at some other traits about how you form your opinion. So I'm looking at the most important ones at the moment. And the opinion is the willingness to explore different viewpoints, but being confident in what you know without it being a fixed position. So I know what I know, but I'm not fixed on it. That's what you need to be. That's what I mean by having a balanced viewpoint. So you look at being certain, that's the tendency to feel confident in one's opinions. Yes, I'm certain about that. Now, the other end of the spectrum, I'm open and I'm reflective. So I reflect on many different viewpoints. That's the either end of the scale. They appear contradictory as a trait, but they're not. It's the yin and the yang, and it's about balance. So you ask yourself here, is my opinion too easily changed to an alternative view? Do I get often asked to open my mind? See, either one, other end. See, someone who's quite open about other people's opinions quite often doesn't have one and goes and is never consistent. Not consistent because they're always changing their mind because they heard another opinion. But the other person has a closed mind and doesn't open it. And the way the world goes, the way it changes, that's very dangerous. So ask yourself a question. Do you love being in brainstorming sessions at work? That might be because you love hearing other people's opinions. If you think they're a waste of time, then maybe you're a bit more of a fixed mindset than you think. But when I say brainstorming sessions, I mean, do you also say something? Do you contribute? Don't just sit there and listen to everyone else. So I love my brainstorming session, but I like to contribute. There again, I balance. So the key is to ask yourself those questions. Be aware of where you sit on that scale. You're too far in a fixed opinion, or you're too far in the growth opinion or the open opinion, where you just take on everything. So that comes that growth or fixed mindset. Matter of fact, I've got a few clients now, larger companies, they look for in their job interviews for people with a mindset. If they think that person's got a fixed mindset, they don't get the job. They don't even get a look in. So they test that now, where once they didn't, but they do now. Because they realise the way the world changes, you must be open to change. You must be open that an opinion can change. What was right today may not be right in 2 weeks. You've only got to look at the world when you look at this. The collective wisdom of what the world thought on certain issues 25 years ago or 20 years ago, 10 years ago, is substantially different to what it thinks now. And what could be said 10 years ago, you can't say now. That's collective wisdom moving forward. So that's why you always got to have that growth mindset, but still have a perspective that I'm quite confident in my opinions. I believe in what my perspectives are. So take a minute and always look at those issues. Go deep within yourself and be honest with yourself so you can actually get better and improve and be more balanced. It's interesting because that becomes a mindset, particularly with opinions. And the moral is if you change your mindset, you can change your life. So when you're looking to be a bit more open and some of these behaviours, even with communication, it's what mindset do you want to keep? So I'm asking you to open your mindset. If you open that mindset, you can change your life. Because if you change it, you'll change your life, no doubt about it. So just an interesting part, I read a survey, don't ask me who it was, they had one of the big accounting firms, consulting side, was they surveyed employees, and one of the biggest hates they have with their bosses is their volatility. That's the biggest hate. They even said they'd prefer to work for a bad boss if the boss was consistently bad. That's the behaviours I'm talking about. Too far up one end. See, when it's too far up one end, it's consistent because they get used to working around that boss who's a total whatever with that behaviour. And when it's unbalanced, what happens is, now you know this, what's the word? A good old English saying over the years was, your bark's worse than your bite. Well, that's what we're actually saying. Some of these old sayings actually have a lot of truth in them, because there are people with a bark worse than their bite. And that's exactly getting back to the communication. Because a person, and no different to this one, but with the opinions, but a person who's very blunt in their communication, when under a lot of pressure, they either say nothing or they get very nice. See, the bark means they're always blunt in their communication. When under pressure, they do the opposite. That's what the paradox is that you basically under pressure flip to the opposite behaviour. So when you get to opinions, for someone who's very strong in an opinion, when under pressure, they'll revert to the opposite. And then someone who's so open and has all these opinions coming in and wants to say it all and not sure what to do, under a lot of pressure to form an opinion, they'll become very, very fixed and focused. Now, it's just the psychology of us is that that's how we operate. That's the bark worse than the bite, or the bite's worse than the bark. And now you'll know people who are forms of behaviour. You know, they can be super nice for days and days and days, or in part of their life, put on a lot of pressure and they'll come out and bite your head off. That's the same thing. See, they're instantly very nice, but under a lot of pressure, they'll bark and bite your head off. That's what we do when we're unbalanced. And that's the volatility that people don't like in their bosses. It's It's one day you're this, next day is that. One day you pat me on the back, next day we're walking on eggshells. That's their pet hate with bosses. Now, so what we're talking about here is all about the balance, as I keep saying it many times. So with your mindset, it's being open to that. Now, when you get to another trait, and the ones I'm using here are the ones that I find the most, well, people are the most volatile in. They seem to have the massive difference in. It causes aggressive behaviours usually, passive sometimes. So we look at interpersonal, right? This is yourself. This is something I'm sure Elizabeth has a lot of passion for. It's being accepting of yourself and who you are, while at the same time trying to prove in the best, you want to be the best person you want to be. So yes, I accept myself. That's the tendency to like oneself. You must like yourself. But at the same time, you must have this mindset that, but I can always get better. See, that's the balance. Where you have where the unbalance is I like myself and I think I'm really great and I don't need to do anything. I'm perfect. You see a few of those people, they don't take feedback very well at all. Most of us are challenged a bit with it, but they don't take it in a big way. Then people at the other end of this is the people who have a low self-esteem. And what they're trying to do is always trying to better themselves. But it's too far at the other end. And in actual fact, when you do challenge those people, they actually come back actually more aggressive because they beat themselves up most of the time. And that's where that behaviour comes in the workplace. The people with the self-esteem issues are the ones that argue the most when put under pressure, when critiqued about their work. Because what I've found is they beat themselves up so much themselves, the last thing they want to have is someone else beating them up. So that's why there again, when you communicate, it must be in a very proactive and deliver with empathy. Because people will react in a lot of different ways that doesn't have the impact that you're trying to get. So ask yourself here, do I believe I'm okay and I don't see the need to improve myself? Do I quite often beat myself up internally and repeatedly and saying what's wrong with me rather than what's right? Am I internally conflicted? Do I really value myself? Now, the key is, I do get this quite a bit, is the lower self-esteem. Surprisingly, even with people in reasonably senior positions, they still struggle. So the key is, and I get them, that just look in the mirror and tell yourself that you are a good person, and look for the wins that you've done today, and look for positives. That's the only way you can talk yourself out of that, right? The key is you need to be seeing yourself as having good qualities, but you're still looking for ways to improve. That's what you're doing. No different to opinions. I'm strong in my opinion, but I know there could be another one around the corner that'll be better. I can change things because my opinion will change. See, they're very related. They're all related. Then we look into an achievement, how you make your decisions. Opinion's one thing, the decision's the next. So when we look at decisions approach, use your logical mind to work out the data. Do you use your logical mind or do you use your intuition? The key is keep the balance. Use your logical mind to work out the day-to-day issues, and quite often use your inner vision to guide your direction. So it's always a combination. That you sit in the analytical mind and you won't get too far because you're always reviewing it, always looking for different things that can happen. The key is you just got to go with your gut. And most entrepreneurs go with their gut, otherwise they never would have started their business. because there's no history or data to tell them this will be successful. It's just the gut feel. So when you look at making decisions, yes, you need to analyse data. You need to look at what's around you, but you need to follow your gut. And basically, to me, I always say use the data for your day-to-day tactics. Use your gut for where you're heading, and sort of do it that way, in a way that you're becoming balanced in how you make the decisions. So ask yourself, am I mindful how I view my bigger decisions? Do I sit there and have to analyse it to death? Do I ignore my inner voice that's chipping away, saying, trying to nudge you in some direction? It's something you keep analysing, tells you to don't do it. You just need to be honest and open with yourself. Now, the key is, it's okay. I think I'll give you another example. I've got a client that used to have a mantra: get it right the first time. Most of the employees are engineers. Everything's a bit more black and white with them. Get it right the first time. What they're finding, the way the world goes quicker and quicker and quicker and faster, they weren't finishing projects on time. Why? Because people were waiting to get it right the first time. Nothing ever happened. So now their mantra is, if it's 80% okay, just go for it. We'll work the rest out later. It's the only way they could actually finish project and work on time. So there again, do I follow my gut, or do I follow and analyse it too much? You've got to move forward. Even making a bad decision is better than never making one, because you learn from the bad one. You learn nothing from making a decision. You learn nothing. But if you make one, and you may have to make it, because that's the way it's meant to happen, you'll learn from it, then you build on that, and then you actually then make the right decision. So what I'm getting at is follow your gut and just go forward. So when I look at styles, and I get back to those styles are great, and that's fine. And people like to hear what style they are. It's sort of, oh, I like to be in that box. But it's not helpful when you're looking at your leadership skills. It's nice to know, but not. It's nice to know, but not the critical know. The critical know is how do my behaviours impact people?
Wow.
And I need to impact, and what impact I want. I need to look at my specific behaviours, which will be parts of other styles. But the context of where I'm working or what I'm doing with my friends, whatever it is, it's just about the behaviours. What behaviours do I want to have to be the leader I want to be? And that's what I can follow it on, is think about what behaviours, and we'll talk about more of this when I do part 2 on Wednesday, hopefully the slides. So think about how do I want to be described as a leader? And not just I want to be described as a task focused or whatever, colour red or blue or pink or polka dot, doesn't really matter. How do I want to be described? Because people describe you based on your behaviour. It's the only way they'll describe it. And remember, they only ever remember you by how you made them feel. That's it. That's the only way people remember you. How did you make them feel? Now, it doesn't mean to say I want behaviour that made people feel all warm and fuzzy and nothing ever achieved. That won't work for them anyway, because they know that you're ineffectual. So you didn't make them feel that well anyway. You're nice, but didn't really add value to them, didn't grow them. So the key is, write down as an exercise. It's not War and Peace, it's just 4 or 5 lines. How do I want to be described as a leader? Then when we talk about that on Wednesday, we get zero in it a bit more. Now, what do I have to do in order for me to be described that way? It doesn't happen by chance. It's not a wish list. And the good leaders work exactly, they know how they want to be described, and they do the behaviours day in and day out that they need to do in order to be described that way. That's the key. Now, that's it, Elizabeth. So any questions from anyone?
Interesting, your questions. It makes me to look outside the box now, because yes, we've been talking about leadership style and other principles and other things. But with what you've just shared with us, to me, that is new. And I think that is the most important thing to learn, as well as other things. It's about behavior.
It is
Me,
about, it's all about behavior.
it's all about behavior, because
It's all
even
about
when,
behavior.
exactly, even when you're trying to adapt one particular style of, leadership style, it still needs to come back to who you are.
That's exactly right.
So
you need to be authentic.
exactly. So we need to understand it more better, that yes, this is the leadership styles, but who am I in these lead styles, these categories? And I also like the way you started as well, that sometimes when we look at only the leadership style, we are limiting ourselves.
You are.
We are categorizing ourselves to one particular. Because even while I've been listening to others leaders, and I've been looking at everything, I'm sitting down here and said, yes, I'm a transformational leader. Yes, I'm inspirational leader. By the time they finish all their talk, it looks like I am bits and bits of everything. So you really need to know who you are, and also demonstrate your behavior, because that is the only way to develop yourself, assess yourself, know who you are, know your ability, your ability to lead, and also improve from there. I think we have a question, so let me not waste your time. I will go straight to the question now.
Yeah, no, look, because you're spot on, Elizabeth. See, I just want to make that point, is that, and then they could call you an inspirational leader. There's nothing wrong with that, because that's not a style. That's a behavior. But it's a description of a behavior. It's one level up. Then what do you have to do day in, day out in order for people to say you inspire me? That's the behavior. The difference, it's like I just go one step up and it becomes an opinion, but that's okay. Style is a bunch of opinions, right? It's a big box of pile of stuff. But I'm an inspirational leader. If you say you want to be inspirational, then how do I break that to a behavior? Inspiration is not a behavior. It's a description of what I do.
Yes.
So what have I got to do? It might be two things, one thing that I have to do day in, day out for someone to say, Elizabeth, you're inspirational. That's the behaviors, right? That's what I mean. That's what you focus on. Wow. You do it and you'll get it. You'll get described that way. I think there's a question. There's a few questions there.
Yes.
Sorry.
Bola Tito, this is so intriguing. How do I want to be described as a leader? That's a big question every leader should ask themselves. Thank you, sir.
They should.
So it's a comment.
And look, I asked all the people I coach, that's one of the things I asked them. But it was funny. It's funny though, and I've never seen anyone in any time I've asked them that they write down, I want to be known as the worst leader they've ever worked for. I've never seen anyone, right? But they might act that way, but they don't write it down. That's the interesting thing, right? They'll always write nice words. Then when I say, okay, what have you got to do? Because I'm not a fairy with a magic wand. I can't just bing and you'll be described that way. What do you got to do? Then they start looking at it. Oh, then they go, see, that's when it becomes a bit of a moment. It's a bit of more of an epiphany. And that's what then they suddenly realise. Now, some do it. And I've seen some people turn their leadership life around. Well, in essence, their life around. Because what they do at work, they quite often do at home. The way they talk to their children, their partner, etc., right? But others go, oh yeah, that's right, but they never do it. And you sort of try to help them, but they just don't have the discipline to do it. It's a nice to have, but I just do what I'm doing. And but luckily they're the minority, not the majority. Anyway, what questions? Sorry, I keep talking.
The question oh, sorry. The next speaker is asking for the link. So let me just give you. Yeah, no, the question, I think she just commented on that.
I just saw it pop up.
Yes, I think she grabbed, I mean, she understood what you meant. So she was just trying to comment on that and say,
Yeah, okay.
all right, so how do I want to be described as a leader? That's the questions that every leader needs to ask. I
That's
mean,
right.
it's just like
And
there's one quote I was trying to remember, and it's especially when I'm dealing with teachers, when I'm encouraging the teachers. I said, you can use, in fact, I think it's Richard Branson that first said it. He said, you can use the technology, you can use everything, but what people will remind you of is how you make them feel.
that's exactly right. That is the only memory you'll ever have of people. That's it. And that's why being over-task focused can work in the short term, but won't work in the long term.
Mm,
Is
mm,
because people aren't feeling good working for you. They'll eventually leave, or the good ones will. The bad ones won't because they can't find another job, right? So all the competent ones are gone, and you're left with a bunch of incompetents that have to wait around for an order because they don't know what to do. They've got to wait for the order, and they suffer while they try to get another job somewhere. But the good ones, they go because they can get a job. They
mm,
just want to hear it, right? So because you're not making them feel there's not a good feelings about that, right? That's the
mm,
difference. And if you're too nice, there's not good feelings about it either. Because
mm,
they don't believe they're getting anywhere and being developed, not learning anything. Person's too nice. There's no constructive feedback. There's nothing, right? See? So the key is, and the key is that it's how you made them feel. Now, the other thing I just want to make is you can do that exercise in any type of thing, right? So if you're asking how I want to be a leader, if you want to say how you want to be as a person, how do I want people to describe me as a friend, as a partner, as a wife, as a husband, as a mother, as a father? All be nice descriptions. Now, what have I got to do in order for my son or daughter to call me to describe me as a father that way? There is no difference. You can do it anywhere. And you'll find in all those categories, they'll be very similar. The context may change slightly, but they'll be similar. You still got to communicate in a constructive way with your son or your daughter, with your wife, with your husband, whatever, right? You still got to do it. Just the context is slightly different in the way you're thinking of it. But you do that in your life, you can really get a good, whole life ahead of you because you do. And the key is just having the discipline to do it. And the discipline comes from the desire to want to do it.
very interesting. Very interesting. Very interesting. I'm looking forward I'm looking forward to your next section 2 days time on the
Well,
13th
may I
of
say,
March.
we'll get on half an hour early and practice our.
Let's hope so.
I don't know what's happened today. I don't know.
Yes.
No.
Um, I just want to quickly ask a question. We're dealing with leadership, right? And you are raising the skill of a leader, okay, by talking about the behavior. Is there any particular skills that we can learn from to become an effective leader? Do you have an idea, or maybe behavior skills or something?
To be a what leader? So I didn't quite get that.
Yes, yes. For example, if I want to work on my behavior,
Yeah.
is there any other particular training or courses that I can?
To work on your behaviour,
Yeah,
again, it has to have
okay.
the discipline to do it, right? So that's a belief I want to be that person, not just writing down because it looks good. I actually want to be that person. And therefore you're writing down the behaviours that will take you to that description. So it's not about any other behaviour apart from looking at it day in and day out. And I can give you an example, Elizabeth. I was coaching a woman who had some leadership challenges. She was promoted into a job that's quite big. 50, 60 staff, accounting firm, right? And she was tasked, she wasn't getting good feedback. Staff were leaving, all sorts of problems. Did she want that? No. So when I did that exercise, I could see the fire in her eyes. That's the leader I want to be, but where I am is here. And my intent is good, but my delivery's not, right? So we looked on the behaviours that were needed. So she worked on it. Now, she had a checklist of about 5 or 6 things she had to do every day. She'd look at it before she went to work. She'd look at it in her office when she got to work. She'd look at a coffee break, lunchtime, afternoon, and before she went home. She looked at it all the time and ticked a box. Did I do that now? Have I done that? No, I haven't done that one yet, but I haven't done it. You know, like she assessed herself day in and day out. That was the only way she would keep reminding herself that's what she had to do. There's a bit of a movement from where she used to be. She's a bit too much of a micromanager. See, the intent was good, but not the delivery. So she gradually moved and got to the behaviour she wanted to get to. So that helped. And then over time, he still looks at it. I'm sure she does look at it, but only once a day, probably. And just becomes that awareness, self-awareness. I'm more aware now, and it's more habit, but I need to look at it every day just to make sure I didn't fall down somewhere, right? And if I did, I'd go and apologise. That's what she'd do, right?
That's excellent. Before you go, sir, there is one question that just quickly come in. The question is from Emmanuel Charles. Can a leader with a contrasting behavior compares to the leadership style he or she is trying to adopt still be a great leader?
So what was that? That's right.
Yeah, the question is on the chart. I was trying to read it as well. Can a leader with a contrasting behavior,
like
yes,
up one end, totally up one end,
yes, compares to the leadership style he or she is trying to adopt, still be a great leader?
Well, the adopting the leadership style helps you see the type of understand the type of person you are. Unless you see sometimes what can happen, because every style has a positive and a negative. See, I'm talking about the behaviours, and those few behaviours we talked about then. There's several more. They fit in those styles in different ways. You could be up one end or the other end of that behaviour spectrum, right? The communication, blunt to, that'll put you in a style somewhere, right? So the styles have a positive and a negative. The key is if you've got trouble with your leadership, it helps you aspire to a more positive, because that's the type of person you want to be. So if you want to be an inspirational leader or whatever that style might be, it might move you towards that. But there again, doesn't give you the behaviours that's going to get you there. So I'm not talking about the styles that we don't need them. I'm just saying you don't go for styles. So I'm that style and I live by it. You've got to look at the behaviours to live by, and that by then, over time, given your own personality, DNA, and the context you're working in, will probably plonk you in a bit of a style. But you're more balanced as a leader, and you might be utilising more the good bits of all the styles at different times. I don't know, like it varies, depends on the context and you as an individual. I hope that's answered the question a bit more. But at the end of the day, we're talking about behaviours, and all those behaviours fit in those styles somewhere. The good behaviours and the bad behaviour fits in a style somewhere too. Right?
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
You see, if you're blunt, you won't be inspirational, will you? So how can you be inspirational if you're blunt? But you won't be inspirational if you don't tell anyone anything either. So you've got to say it in an uplifting way that people get inspired by, because they can see the value in what you're saying, but they don't take it personally. That type of thing, right? It's what behaviours you've got to show to act in. An inspirational leader could be a style. Because some are inspirational, and introverted. It doesn't mean to say that there's nothing that's not the good way to be. I know some very good leaders are introverted, but their behaviours, the way they communicate, the way there's a lot of value in.
Thank you so much. I really want to release you, but maybe you can answer this last question.
I'm happy to do, but I slowed everyone at the beginning. So
because another speaker is also around that will be sharing with us. But let me quickly ask this question, sir. Pardon me, Reverend Professor Akpabio. Let me just quickly. Is it all leaders? I think that would be a straightforward question. Anyway, is it all leaders that are true leaders?
all leaders are true. Well, I put it in a different category. You're either a leader or you manage a process. Right? If you're not a leader, then you're a manager of a process. You might have a title. I'm head of this. I'm CEO of that. So everyone calls you the leader. Well, you are. You're ahead of it. But all you do is manage a process. You don't lead people. You can't lead machinery, but you lead people. Right? You manage your process. You lead people. So, and leaders come in all forms. And the most common thing about a leader is they can lead themselves. If you can't lead yourself, you'll never lead others. You think you are, but you're not. You've got to lead yourself. That's the discipline, the belief. And that discipline to follow that checklist of saying these are the behaviours I've got to have. See, that's self-leadership. You're leading yourself through it to become the leader you want to be. And everyone I know wants to become a good leader. I've never had anyone write that I want to be the worst leader ever known, right? No one does it. And yet they could be. I've had a lot of remedial work over the many years. So they get me and say, look, you're their only hope, try it. Otherwise they won't be here. So that's does happen from time to time. Yeah.
The final. So maybe you just give us a few points quickly. What are the major attributes one should look for in a leader?
That's part two. I've got a whole pile of them.
Okay.
That's what I've got is the attribute, because I talk about a few more behaviours and some of the attributes. And at the end of the day, an attribute could be being true to yourself, integrity, which is being true to yourself, having if you've got and being transparent, in theory that's a behaviour. So they're all a bit close to being. But I was going to talk about that on Wednesday.
On Wednesday.
Yeah, the key one is be integrity, be true to yourself, your authenticity. Because at the end of the day, I've never had anyone who goes to their heart thinks ill of anyone. They do up here. The head gets them to compete. The head gets them arrogance. When you get them to their heart, they don't wish bad for anyone. You've got to get them there. Some people can be a bit of a journey to get there. But generally speaking, you get them to the heart. That's why I say soul inspired, because that's the authentic you. That's your leadership authenticity. And whatever style people put you at that's the authenticity. Okay, I've got to let you go. And
so Dr. Ambassador Omotala Shoboali, you can join us again on the 13th of March. And then Honorable Ross Swan will be able to answer all other questions. So thank you so much for your questions.
All right,
thank you so much, Honorable Ross Keith Swan from Singapore, for waking us early in the morning to come and learn this very important topic. And we really appreciate you, sir. And we wish you all the best and have a wonderful day. Thank you, sir, for joining us this morning. I really appreciate that. Thank you. On behalf of Y.Y.C.I International, we say thank you for joining us and sharing with us. Thank you, sir.